It's Pastor Kim, and I'm coming to you from my office at church. I have here a special carton of eggs. I'm sure you all have cartons of eggs in your refrigerators, but these are not the kind of eggs that we eat. These are special eggs that tell the Easter story. So I'm going to open each one up and tell a little bit about the story. We have a blue one, and inside the blue egg is a tiny little donkey. I don't know if you can even see him. And that reminds us of Palm Sunday when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey and people waved palms and said, "Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna to the King of Kings." Let's check out this light pink one. Oh, later that week, later after Jesus came into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, one of his disciples, a disciple named Judas, decided to betray him. That means he did a mean thing to him. He lied about him. And he did it for some coins. He did it for 30 coins of silver. I only have 3 here, but they remind us of what Judas did in order to betray Jesus. Let's see, what do we have here? Oh, you probably see this when you come to church, and it's communion time, and Pastor Kim holds up a special chalice during communion time. And that represents the story on the night before Jesus was betrayed. He had a special Passover meal with his disciples, and that's where we get our communion meal from. Something orange. Oh, later that night, later after the meal, Jesus went into a place called the Garden of Gethsemane, and he prayed and he prayed and he prayed that maybe he wouldn't have to die on the cross. But even though he prayed that he would not have to die on the cross, he said, "Not what I want, Lord, but what you want." What else? Let's see. Oh, after Jesus' trial the next day, it wasn't a real trial, he was whipped. And this is a piece of leather strap that represents the kind of whip that they would have whipped Jesus with. Even though he did nothing wrong, they punished him anyway. Some people knew that the Jewish people were waiting for their Messiah to come, their king. And so, in order to kind of make fun of him, they put a cross made out of thorns on his head and said, "Yes, you're the king." I think up close, maybe you can see some kind of pokey things there. And that would really hurt if that were on your head. Let's see what's in this yellow egg. Here we have a cross. And the cross, if you look up closely, is made out of nails. And we know that Jesus was nailed to the cross by some people who thought he was bad, but of course we know he wasn't. He didn't own many things, Jesus didn't, but there was a place in the Bible that talked about the soldiers who crucified him wanted to get his clothes, and so they decided to roll dice for his clothing. So that helps us remember that part of the story. When Jesus was on the cross, but before he died, he was poked in the side by a soldier using a spear. And so he was already hanging on the cross by nails, with nails, but he also was poked in the side. After Jesus died, he was buried in a tomb. And one of the things they did back in those days was they wrapped people in cloths, in white cloths, and laid them in the tomb. And they'd have your body wrapped up, and then they'd have a special cloth that they would lay over your face. Now, tombs in those days were often caves kind of dug out of the rocks. And so this rock represents a stone that they put at the entrance to the tomb or the cave or the grave so that the person would be sealed inside. But on Easter Sunday, when the women came to the tomb, that stone was rolled away. And they looked inside that tomb. And what they found is exactly what we find in this last egg. Nothing. It's an empty tomb. It's an empty egg. It's an empty tomb because Jesus has risen from the dead. So I hope that you enjoyed this unusual little carton of eggs filled with things that help us to remember the story of Easter.